You've had this debate with someone before, and so have I. Is Michael Jordan greater than LeBron James? There are so many reasons and so many angles that we can dive into that give the edge to MJ. We will attack every single counterpoint, and I will provide nothing but straight up facts on why this shouldn't even be a debate. There are so many levels to this, but we'll start with the basics. LeBron has played in 490 more regular season games and 113 more playoff games. That's a total of 603 more career games and counting. That is the equivalent of a little over 7 full regular seasons. To put this in perspective, that is more career games than Jason Tatum or Donovan Mitchell have played in the regular season. That is a huge advantage for a player like LeBron to accomplish much more than Jordan did. Despite the gap, Michael has won 2 more titles, 2 more Finals MVPs, 1 more regular season MVP, 9 more scoring titles, 1 more Defensive Player of the Year award, and 4 more All-NBA First Team defensive selections. In the playoffs, Michael Jordan has never lost while being favored to win a series. LeBron has lost 4 times while having home court advantage in the series. He has lost the playoff series 14 times in his career. That is twice as many as Jordan did. That includes 6 finals losses, the same number that Jordan won, except he never lost in the finals. LeBron has been pushed to a 7th game 8 times in his career. Jordan has only competed in a 7th game 3 times. That is just a taste of the overwhelming evidence that favors Michael Jordan. Let's start with the first category. Basketball has always been more than just skill, God-given talent, and ability. There's also a mental aspect. You not only have to possess a deep knowledge of the game, but you also have to be mentally strong to endure the challenges and pressures that come with being an NBA player. That's even more so if you want to be one of the greats of the game. Michael Jordan and LeBron James have mastered this skill. That's why they're both worthy of the elusive GOAT title. But when you're choosing the greatest player of all time, you have to pick apart differences. The challenging part about this discussion is that there is no statistic that we can point to that determines who has the mental edge. What we can do is dissect their actions and listen closely to the testimonials of their teammates and competitors. After reviewing all these factors, we'll see exactly why this player deserves to be the GOAT. The first aspect is how they use mind games to gain a psychological advantage over their opponents. Most people call it fear, others intimidation. No matter the term you prefer to use, it's clear that you'll gain a competitive advantage when you're causing your opponent to walk on eggshells. There are more than enough testimonials that are out there to conclude that both players were feared. The question is, who uses Jedi mind trick better? Let's check out what Denver Nuggets coach Michael Malone said to the USA Today back in 2020. Quote, "I coached LeBron James for 5 years and have a great relationship with him. LeBron did not have the same mindset or killer mentality that Michael Jordan is supposed to have." He continues saying, "Michael Jordan was not just a great player. He would reach into your chest and pull your heart out if he had to win a game. You don't see that really often. He had that killer mindset and brought it every single night. That's why all these many years later, he's the greatest of all time." End of quote. We've never seen a killer like him. His performance and intensity in the playoffs always went to another level because he always felt like he had something to prove. It came to the point where there was an unwritten rule in the mid to late 90s that you don't talk trash or even look at him funny. Take for example what former New Jersey Nets player Jason Williams told Details magazine, quote, "You don't want to look him in the eye because he takes it as a challenge like a Doberman would. He's looking for any incentive to beat you." End of quote. When Steve Smith played against the Bulls in the 1997 playoffs, he told Sports Illustrated that you can't afford to get frustrated against him because if he sees you get down, then he'll try to crush you. You hear so many stories that coaches tell their players, keep your head down, shut up, and don't give him any reason to get going. There might be an intangible aspect of his game, but there's a reason why former players always mention it. It's because it affected his opponents. Can we say the same about LeBron? Well, we have conflicting reports. There are some players, such as George Hill and Draymond Green, who mentioned that their teammates or themselves were terrified of him. But then we have former teammates who said the exact opposite. Mario Chalmers mentioned to the OG show that nobody fears LeBron. Then Shaq mentioned in his own podcast that he's never really heard any player say that they feared LeBron as he did with Jordan or Kobe. It's obvious that his contemporaries don't all feel the same way. But with Jordan, there are no doubts about his killer will. That's why you would have to give him the edge in this aspect. The questions on LeBron's killer will was a topic of discussion in the summer of 2010. It's the most controversial free agent move in NBA history. It's when he publicly decided to take his talents to South Beach and form a super team along with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. I'm not here to criticize his right to choose which team he wants to play on. Let's not bring a 14-year-old debate back to life. But we do see a clear difference in the way they handled their playoff failures. Let's start with the similarities. They both were having trouble defeating a team that was superior in talent. Jordan lost to the Pistons in 3 straight years. LeBron lost to the Celtics twice between 2008 and 2010. The Chicago Bulls and the Cleveland Cavaliers were not considered deep enough to defeat their rivals, who were full of star players. There is no question that Michael and LeBron were frustrated with their situation. So how did they choose to handle it? This is how Jordan responded after an embarrassing loss to Detroit in Game 7 of the 1990 Conference Finals. Quote, "I'm proud of the season and what we achieved. So I'm going to look at this as a learning experience. Certainly, some guys didn't play as they were capable, but that happens. You've got to move on and try to see that you can go farther next year." End of quote. He didn't plan on going anywhere. He was going to keep climbing that mountain until he reached his goal. He was not going to take the easy way out. His teammates needed to get tougher to defeat the bad boy Pistons. So there were times when he openly questioned whether his teammates were tough enough to beat them. We could debate on whether or not he took the right approach, but we can't argue with the results. They came back the following year, swept the Pistons, and won the title. It was the beginning of the greatest dynasty of the modern NBA. This was much different than LeBron's approach. He joined a team that had 2 established superstars. They were unquestionably the most talented team with his arrival. I can't help but to wonder if that's why many of his contemporaries don't have that same level of fear as Jordan's did. Although they ended up defeating the Celtics in 5 games, they lost in the finals as the heavy favorites. If you remember, this is where the talking heads ceased all Michael Jordan comparisons. It wasn't just the multiple bad games they had in the series against Dallas. Everyone is guilty of playing poorly in the finals. The problem was how passive and detached he was in critical moments in the 4th quarter. He kept deferring to his teammates even when he had favorable matchups. How else could you explain those performances other than some kind of mental block that he couldn't hurdle over? The reason why I mention this is because this seems to be a pattern of behavior. This was not a one-time offense. Remember Game 5 of the 2010 semifinals against Boston when he also wasn't aggressive on offense. Every so often, he has to fight those demons when things don't go his way in the playoffs. He would seem visibly frustrated and then check himself out of the series. That mindset of fighting till the end, of shooting until your bullet chamber is empty, is not something that can always be said about him. On the other hand, Michael Jordan has a reputation of leaving nothing on the court, even in the toughest moments. We go back to Game 7 against Detroit in 1990. Imagine his frustrations. He lost to this team twice already. He hears everybody criticizing his style of play, that it would never result in winning championships. He wants to beat this team badly, but his teammates fail him. They shot a combined 15 of 63 from the field, or 24%. But if you watch the game, Jordan never stopped shooting. He never stopped looking for his teammates. He never stopped competing. This isn't just a 1-game sample. He maintained that mindset throughout his career. Even if he had to go 12 of 32 from the field, or 9 of 35 from the field, he was going to keep being aggressive. His stats were not as important as winning the game. So even the few times he failed as a competitor, you couldn't question his mindset. That never wavered. That mindset of always competing is reflected in other areas. For example, his refusal to take any games off. And I mean that in the most literal sense. There were 9 times where he played all 82 games of the regular season. A lot of that has to do with luck. Not all players are as fortunate to remain healthy throughout the course of the season. Some players are simply injury prone. But that is not a term that we can use to describe LeBron James. He is arguably the most durable athlete we have ever seen. Therefore, this would be a fair comparison to make. LeBron has played all 82 games once in his career. Why is that? Does he get injured that much? Let's take a look at the evidence. Do you see those random games off that he's taking? We're looking at his game log from 2015, 2016, 2017, and beyond. Those were rest days, aka load management. This was something that he clearly participated in. I'm not inferring that this is a bad thing. Sports science is a big part of these players' lives, and the data backs up the benefits of this. However, on many occasions, many of the modern day players have complained about the mental drain they experience during the season. It's tough to get up for every game. If that's the case, then it takes a physically and mentally strong player to perform at a high level every single game. You have to be able to fire yourself up, to block out all the pain and perform. This was the case for Michael. Unless there was something seriously wrong with him physically, he was out there playing. LeBron has claimed he would do the same unless he wasn't healthy. But that clearly wasn't the case when there are plenty of reports that list them out for resting purposes. I can assure you that Jordan has strong opinions on load management, and he would overrule any coach who wanted to sit him out. He knew how important the regular season was to be prepared for the playoffs. That's hard to do if you're sitting on the sidelines. If he wanted his troops to be ready, he needed to set an example. We mentioned that it's tough for the players to get up for every game, but it's even tougher after winning a title. You lose some of that fire and motivation after reaching the mountaintop. But with the Chicago Bulls, they always remain dominant after winning it all. Check out their records. They went from winning 61 games in 1991 to 67 games in 1992. Then they went from winning 72 games in 1996 to 69 games in 1997. What was their secret? Among many things, it was Michael's demand for excellence. He knew how easy it was to be complacent after experiencing so much success. For example, in 1998, the Sun Sentinel asked a few of Jordan's teammates what it was like playing with him, and they gave some interesting answers. For example, Brian Williams said this, quote, "You feel like you're taking a test. It's more just a measure of your character, your personality, because he wants to know if you're out there on the court with him, what he can expect, how far you're willing to fight. With a guy as good as him, the test never ends." End of quote. It's no wonder that the Chicago Bulls triangle offense ran like a well-oiled machine. They were overly prepared, and their on-floor leader had a lot to do with that. He was very cerebral with his approach. Instead of simply winning games with his greatness alone, he wanted his teammates to also contribute by playing their roles to perfection. In LeBron's case, he deserves all the credit in the world for Miami's dominant season in 2013. That was when they repeated as champions and won 66 games. His leadership and availability had a lot to do with their historical season. But in his last 2 titles, his team was considerably worse in the following years. For example, the Cavaliers went from 57 wins to 51 in 2017. Once he joined the Lakers in 2019, he has become less and less available for his team. His advanced age surely has a lot to do with that. But remember, even at 40 years old, Michael played all 82 games in his final season with the Washington Wizards. He had that old school mentality until the very end, and it helped bring 6 titles to the Bulls. I believe those were the clear distinctions between these legendary players. With Michael Jordan, behind all that success and glamour, was a player who dominated the game with his body and mind. We may never see anything like it ever again. When you think you have heard it all, when you think you have heard every argument and every angle of this ongoing debate, I present to you a new twist, a new line of argument that could put this heated debate to rest for good. Before we get to that, let me first present the premise. Surely, you've heard many of the Michael Jordan supporters point to the 6 titles that he has over LeBron's 4 titles. I'll admit, that's a lazy argument, simply because there are a variety of factors to consider when a team wins a title. There's the fact that it's a team achievement. Then you have to consider the competition, the era they played in, and injuries, just to name a few. However, have we really considered why Michael Jordan was responsible for so much team success? Let's put aside their individual greatness, numbers, and accolades for this discussion. Let's analyze their stylistic approach to the game and how much that had to do with winning. At the beginning of their careers, they were both stuck with rosters that did not have players who could create shots for themselves well. So the Chicago Bulls and the Cleveland Cavaliers relied heavily on their star players to win games. At first, Michael's approach was to score as many points as possible. He had the energy and the skill to score at will while effectively guarding the other team's best perimeter player. In the middle of the 1989 season, he was moved from shooting guard to point guard. He essentially always had the ball in his hands. That allowed him to average 32.5 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists that year. In LeBron's case, he worked extremely well with Cleveland's read and react offense. He was blessed with excellent basketball instincts, and he displayed a great balance of taking over games and getting others involved. The offense revolved completely around him, and they were thriving. They even had back-to-back 60-win seasons in 2009 and 2010. This is where we stop and start to analyze their stylistic approach in the next phases of their careers. In Jordan's case, the Bulls named Phil Jackson as their head coach, and players such as Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant were starting to progress rapidly. In LeBron's case, he took his talents to South Beach and formed a super team with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. In both cases, they were in win-now situations. In both cases, they needed to adjust to make the most of the talent surrounding them. In both cases, they fell short of reaching their goals for the same reason. In part, they fell back to their old habits. In Michael's case, he averaged even more shots per game than the previous year. In LeBron's case, he did not adapt his game to Wade and Bosh well enough, and he deferred too much to his star teammates. The Miami Heat were trying to build some kind of offensive system where they could use their abundance of offensive talents to overwhelm their opponents. That explains why they were the only team to have 2 players that averaged over 25 points per game. Since it didn't reach their lofty expectations, changes needed to be made to their offensive approach. So they decided to play a half-court offense built around floor spacing for his 3-point shooters. They decided to put the ball in their best players' hands to direct the offense. The system revolved around him, and everywhere he went, his teams were running some version of that offense. Did it work? Of course it did. 4 titles and 10 finals appearances are all the evidence we need. But he wasn't more successful than what Michael was doing in the 90s. In his case, Phil Jackson did not accommodate his playing style just because they had a bitter end to their season. The triangle offense that he implemented could only be successful if all 5 players worked in unison. Everyone needed to be involved. The system does not cater to one player. And to his credit, he bought into the triangle offense. Instead of making Scottie Pippen sacrifice his game as Dwayne Wade needed to do, he was allowed to grow as a player. In fact, his scoring and assist numbers went up for the next 2 years. In Jordan's case, his numbers continued to go down as the years went by, with a few exceptions. For example, his assist numbers went down in the late 90s because he was no longer bringing the ball up the court. He would direct the offense from the post instead. This is more than just a personal preference of which style is better. History says that you could win a championship by revolving your offense through one player. But history also says that you can't be a dynasty that way. From Bill Russell's teams down to Steph Curry's teams, you have to be a part of a system for a team to reach immortality. For that to happen, you need certain pieces around you to succeed. That we can't deny. But your star player also needs to give a little to allow the other pieces to shine within that system. And it just always seemed like LeBron's teams could never function when he wasn't on the court. Even when they had Hall of Fame players such as Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Love, who has had multiple All-Star appearances. For this next stat, we are excluding the 2018-19 season when LeBron missed the playoffs. From 2011 to 2020, LeBron's teams went 15-34 when he didn't play. How can a team that has Kyrie and Love go a combined 4-23 from 2015 through 2017 when James wasn't on the floor? How does that work? That is because when you take away a player who is the entire system, the team is going to be completely dysfunctional, even when the team has plenty of talent to make up the loss of one player. But that never happened with the Chicago Bulls. When Jordan retired in 1993, the Bulls went from winning 57 games to 55. In 1997, when Dennis Rodman missed 27 games, Tony Kukoc missed 25 games, and Luke Longley missed 23 games, the Bulls ended up winning 69 games. And when Scottie Pippen missed the first 35 games of the 1998 season, the Bulls won 24-11, which was the best record in the East. This team was able to thrive no matter what situation they were in. And that is because Michael Jordan was able to find ways to be himself while playing within a system. It's not out of line to question if that's why LeBron's teams can never be described as juggernauts except for a few seasons. Just think about this. Michael Jordan was a part of 5 60-win seasons. LeBron was a part of 3. Now here's the crazy part. He only had one 60-win season after 2011 when he orchestrated multiple super teams. Here's another interesting fact. If you were to mention the greatest teams of all time, your top 10 would surely include the 1996 Bulls, the 1986 Celtics, the 1987 Lakers, the 2001 Lakers, the 1971 Bucks, the 2014 Spurs, and the 2017 Warriors. Players such as Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Steph Curry, and Tim Duncan were a part of historic teams. Shouldn't it mean something that the supposed greatest player of all time is not included on that list? Not even one time out of 21 seasons? He is not an outlier. He is not a victim of circumstance. This is all part of a pattern. There's no other way to explain that. His style of play has to hold some of the blame. If that is the case, his status as a GOAT needs to be seriously questioned. You don't have to believe that Michael Jordan is the greatest player of all time. Say what you want about his style of play, but you can't say the same about him. Which player faced tougher opponents in the playoffs? Which one faced more legendary players? We don't just want to look at the finals. We want to see the whole picture. This is from an unbiased perspective. All I'm going to do is give you what the numbers say. The stats will reveal the shocking truth of this heated debate. The first stat that we're going to start with is the number of games that Jordan and LeBron have played in the postseason. This will help contextualize the numbers I'm going to present to you all. Michael played in 179 playoff games, or in 37 playoff series. LeBron has played in 287 playoff games, or in 54 playoff series. That is 108 more playoff games and in 17 more playoff series that James has played over MJ. Just to put this in context, Carmelo Anthony has played in 83 playoff games and 16 playoff series. The difference in playoff games and playoff series between Michael and LeBron is essentially an entire career of a top 75 player and then some. In theory, LeBron should dominate in all the categories, but he didn't. It's a lot closer than it should have ever been. Let's start with the number of teams that won over 50 games that they played against. Before I reveal these numbers, there's one thing that I have to mention to even the playing field. There were 2 times when the NBA needed to shorten the season during LeBron's career. That's in 2012 due to a lockout, and in 2020 due to the pandemic. I wanted to be as fair as possible, so I decided to look at the win percentage. That will help give an accurate estimation of how many wins a team would have had if they played in a regular 82 game season. For example, the 2012 Miami Heat won 69.7% of their games, so they were on pace to win about 58 games. That's the concept that I used for those 2 seasons. With that in mind, LeBron James played against 30 teams that won over 50 games. 7 of those teams also won over 60 games. That includes one 73-win team. Now let's look at Michael Jordan. He played against 27 teams that won over 50 games. And 9 of those teams won over 60 games. If we look at the average number of wins, LeBron's playoff opponents averaged 51.1 wins. Jordan's opponents averaged 53.5 wins. In my opinion, the 3 best teams that LeBron ever played against in the postseason were the 2017 Warriors, the 2014 Spurs, and the 2018 Warriors. For Michael Jordan, it was the 1986 Boston Celtics, then the 1989 and 1990 Detroit Pistons. Let me know in the comments which of those groups you think is the toughest. Now let's look at the other side. LeBron played against 4 teams that had losing records. Those teams were the 2009 Detroit Pistons, the 2013 Milwaukee Bucks, the 2015 Boston Celtics, and the 2020 Portland Trail Blazers. Michael played against 2 teams with a losing record. Those teams were the 1991 New York Knicks and the 1992 Miami Heat. This is what the numbers say. Overall, the teams that Jordan faced in the playoffs were stronger. Now let's look at the players that they played against. We're going to look at the number of players that made the All-Star team throughout their careers. For LeBron James, the number is 77. Here's a full list of players if you want to go through it. For Michael Jordan, the number is 74. Here's a full list of players for MJ as well. Overall, LeBron only faced 3 more All-Star players than Jordan. This may lead to this next question. What about players who were All-Stars in the same season they played against them in the playoffs? Just because Michael played against Chris Mullin in the 1998 playoffs isn't as impressive as if he was in his prime, and that's true. So let's modify those numbers. If we look at each playoff series of LeBron's career, there are 92 total All-Star appearances. If we look at each playoff series of Jordan's career, there are only 59 total All-Star appearances. This now tips the scale in LeBron's favor. But hold on, let's keep digging deeper into their competition. How many times did LeBron face a player who won an MVP? It's 9 times. He faced Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, Dirk Nowitzki, Derrick Rose, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Steph Curry, and Nikola Jokic. How many times did Michael face a player who won an MVP? It's 6 times. He faced Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, and Bill Walton. I know that the last one shouldn't count, but he did play a vital role in the Celtics' success that year. Now what about Hall of Famers? How many has each player faced? In Jordan's case, we have a definitive answer. It's 27, and we have the list of players who are currently in the Hall of Fame. LeBron's case is a little different, since many of the players that he has faced are either still playing or not currently eligible to get nominated. In this graphic, we have 2 different groups. We have the players who are in the Hall, and then we have a separate group of players that I believe will make it once they retire. In total, he has faced about 26 Hall of Fame caliber players. Next up, How many top 75 players did MJ face in the playoffs? There are 17 total players, and here's a list of players that were included in the 75th celebration back in 2022. How many has LeBron faced? Officially, it's 14, but for this discussion, we're going to add Nikola Jokic to the list, so it's 15. Let's break it down even further. How many players who are in the discussion for the top 25 players of all time have they faced? Let's start with Michael Jordan. He has faced 7, in my opinion. Those players are Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Shaquille O'Neal, Isaiah Thomas, Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, and John Stockton. In LeBron's case, he has faced 6 players who are in the discussion. Those players are Tim Duncan, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic, Dirk Nowitzki, and Kevin Garnett. What is Michael's record against those top 25 players? He's 10-6. What is LeBron's record? He's 6-12 against those players in the playoffs. So what is the conclusion that we can come to? As far as the quality of the teams and players that they have faced, the numbers indicate that Michael Jordan faced tougher competition in the playoffs. It's not by a lot, I admit that. But when you consider how much longer LeBron has played, you would think that the numbers would favor him by a large margin. That's not the case. In many instances, it favors Michael Jordan. That's not my take nor my opinion. That's simply what the numbers say. The all-time leader in points versus the all-time leader in career points per game. The all-time leader in playoff points versus the all-time leader in career playoff points per game. They both have the resume to be considered the greatest scorer. But which one deserves the crown? That would depend on each person's criteria. Everyone views scoring greatness differently. Some people value the fact that a player can score from anywhere on the floor, or the ability to consistently convert on difficult shots. Those two highlight more the eye test and their actual skill. For some, they value the numbers more and how efficient they are. It's up to each person to determine which one is more important to them. But if we combine all these factors, we can come up with an answer based on facts and logic. Let's start with each player's scoring skill, or the number of ways they can score. At their best, we wouldn't describe them as one-dimensional. There are a number of ways that they could put the ball through the basket. No matter what side of the debate you're on, we can all agree that they are very exciting players when they attack the rim. They both have utilized their athleticism to punish defenders under the rim. LeBron would rely on his strength much more to score in the paint. The combination of his size, speed, and strength made him an unfair one-on-one matchup. Jordan also had an incredibly quick first step. The combination of his jumping ability and hang time allowed him to score many points in the painted area. This unique set of skills made him a much more crafty finisher under the rim. His layup game was absolutely insane. It wouldn't be far-fetched to say that no one in the history of the league was a more acrobatic finisher. It takes a certain skill to convert on shots like these. Although LeBron has had some nice highlights himself, he's simply not at his level. Now let's move up to the post. Jordan was always extremely effective while operating at the post. He was, and still is, the greatest post-up guard in history. If you watch the games, there is no series of screens to find him a mismatch. He didn't need one. He knew how to use his body to create space. He had impeccable footwork. He knew how to keep his defenders off balance. He understood angles and the timing of the double team so he can get his shot off before it arrived. For those last 3 titles he won, his post-up game was his biggest weapon. That's something that's never been said about LeBron. Although he was efficient whenever he decided to post up, he didn't embrace this area of the game for many years. Take for instance the 2011 finals when he admitted to Bleacher Report back in 2015 that he needed to work on his post game to get closer to the basket. He would often have a smaller defender on him, but he never exploited those mismatches. He would later develop a reliable post-up game in the following years. Remember in Game 2 of the 2018 semifinals against the Raptors when he made 7 fadeaway jumpers. This is something that he now has in his bag, but that's not his bread and butter. When you're guarding LeBron, you know you're going to be fighting a series of picks. You have to try to get under as best as you can so he doesn't blow by the defense for a rim-shattering dunk. Michael didn't need those gimmicks to score. He knew he could score over any and every one. You didn't know if he was going to drive, post up, pull up, elevate, go left, or go right. He had a million ways to score. It's why he remains one of the greatest one-on-one scorers ever. And no one used his strength better than he did. The numbers suggest that we've never seen a more dominant scorer since Wilt Chamberlain roamed the courts. Even though LeBron has played 7 more seasons and nearly 500 more games, he is still behind MJ in various scoring categories. For example, he is still behind him in career 30-point games. In fact, Michael averaged 30.1 points per game for his career. He averaged over 30 points in 7 of his 15 seasons. That's nearly 50% of the time. LeBron has only done it in 3 of the 21 full seasons he's played. That's 14% of the time. For 40-point games, LeBron is behind him by 77. For 50-point games, he's behind him by 17. For 60-point games, Jordan has 4 in the regular season, while LeBron has done it once. In the playoffs, the discrepancy is even more obvious. There were 9 times where Jordan scored more than 50 points. LeBron has scored over 50 points once. Then there are 29 additional games where Jordan scored at least 40 points. To LeBron's credit, he has had at least 40 points in the playoffs 28 times. But that's not all. Michael averaged 33.4 points while playing in 179 games. LeBron is currently at 28.4 points. He's also had 5 playoff series where he averaged at least 40 points. He has 5 of the 7 highest points per game average for a playoff series. He even averaged that many points in the finals. That's right, he averaged 41 points on 51% shooting in the 1993 finals. LeBron has never accomplished such a scoring feat. The numbers clearly favor Michael as the more dominant scorer. But if you're on the LeBron side of the debate, you would surely bring up that this has more to do with MJ's aggressive scoring nature. Michael was a volume scorer, while LeBron is a pass-first player. How many times have we heard this false narrative? I don't know what your definition of a pass-first player is. For me, it's someone who facilitates more than he shoots. It's someone who has more assists than field goals. That is something that cannot be said about LeBron. He has had 6 seasons of averaging over 20 field goal attempts. His career high is 23.1 shot attempts per game. For his career, he's averaging 19.6 field goal attempts. In what universe is that a pass-first player? That is the definition of a scorer's mentality. You don't get to be the all-time leader in points, field goal attempts, and missed shots if you're a pass-first player. That's not how it works. Does he look to facilitate more than Jordan? Yes, that would be the more accurate thing to say, but it's not by as much as you think. If you're on the LeBron side of the debate, you would also bring up the difference in efficiency. He has a higher career field goal percentage average. Although he is a more efficient scorer, we shouldn't confuse this with being the better shooter. Just like we wouldn't say that Giannis is the better shooter over Curry, just because he has a higher field goal percentage. It's all about play style. As we mentioned earlier, he relied heavily on his athleticism for years to score in the painted area. So what did teams do to stop him? They would go under on screens, crowd the paint, and force him to take jump shots. By taking away his strength, they highlighted his biggest weakness. Take, for example, some of the testimonials from his past competitors. Speaking of the 2007 finals, Manu Ginobili said that LeBron wasn't the best scorer back then. He was a great player, of course, but he wasn't the biggest threat. When has that ever been said about MJ? Manu was only being truthful. For that series, LeBron converted on 17.9% of his jump shots. For the 2008 semifinals, James Posey said that he wasn't a great shooter. The game plan was to give him a step or two with a late contest for his jump shot. They tried to give him open looks to entice him to take outside shots. For the 2011 finals, Caron Butler mentioned that they implemented a 1-3-1 zone to force him to take jump shots. In the 2013 finals, what many people consider his peak season, he went 30 of 80 from shots outside the painted area. That is according to the shot tracking data. In the 2015 season, the data also states that he converted on 35% of his mid-range jumpers. This did not improve during the course of the year, as he shot 41.7% during the playoffs. This isn't to say that LeBron hasn't had his moments. There have been 2 seasons where he averaged over 40% from the 3. Now, you have to respect his jump shot, and he could get very streaky. He's made drastic improvements in this aspect. However, we wouldn't describe him as a pure shooter. On the other hand, Michael was getting recognition for being one of the game's top perimeter shooters. We're not saying that he was a better shooter than Reggie Miller or Chris Mullin, but among volume scorers, there is no comparison. For example, check out what Jack McCallum wrote for Sports Illustrated in 1991. Quote, "Jordan is now a better shooter than Larry Bird. Not from long range, but from 20 feet in." End of quote. The consensus was that Michael was an excellent perimeter shooter. Here's how else we know this. In the 1995-96 season, he shot 42.7% from the 3 in the regular season and 40.3% in the playoffs. We understand that the NBA shortened the 3-point line for a very brief period during this time. They shortened it to 22 feet. The 3-point line now is at 23 feet 9 inches from the center of the basket, except in the corners, where it's 22 feet away. So for one season, you could say that he shot corner threes at a 42.7% rate. Isn't that very efficient? That's because he was a pure shooter. I mean, have you ever seen Michael do this? Would a pure shooter ever be guilty of this? He was also automatic from the mid-range, aka the least efficient shot, according to our beloved league mathematicians. That applies to nearly everyone but MJ. Let's look at the numbers. The shot tracking data only goes as far back as the 1996-97 season. As his chart indicates, courtesy of ESPN, he was the best mid-range scorer on the planet. Out of the 1,100 mid-range shots he took, he converted on 49.5%. Just for comparison, Reggie Miller hit 42.4% of his mid-range jumpers on 484 attempts. This is what Jordan did while taking highly contested shots. That's why the team discouraged players from taking mid-range jumpers. You're not going to get easy looks. It takes a highly skilled and precise shooter to put up those kind of numbers while taking the least efficient shot in the game. And this was not considered Michael's peak. Expect those numbers to be higher if this was tracked before his first retirement. We should also recognize that the late 90s and early 2000s were considered the defensive era. The pace was slower, the zone defense was prevalent, and there was more leeway in implementing a more physical approach. It was hard for teams and players to score at a high level. Of course, Michael was the exception. Here's how we know this. For the 1993-94 season to the 1999-2000 season, there was only one player that averaged over 30 points. That was Jordan in 1996, when he averaged 30.4 points on 49.5% shooting. Allen Iverson would be the next player to reach the 30-point mark, but he was nowhere near as efficient. It wasn't until the 2008-09 season that Dwayne Wade scored as many points and was as efficient. By that time, the league had made rule changes to increase scoring. It wasn't easy being a volume shooter during this time, but Michael adjusted his game to dominate the post and mid-range area. We have seen plenty of examples where LeBron couldn't do the same. He was nowhere near as effective. That's because his overall skill and shooting capabilities can't compare. Scoring simply doesn't come as naturally as it did for Michael. That's not to say that LeBron isn't a great scorer. You don't become the all-time scoring leader if you're not a skilled scorer. But that record says more about his longevity than anything else. Nobody will say that Karl Malone is a better scorer than Kevin Durant just because he has more career points. The same applies to this debate. And for me, it's not close. Everything indicates that Michael Jordan is the better scorer. We're talking about a basketball crime so heinous that they are disqualified from being the GOAT. Now, when we say basketball crime, what are we referring to? We're talking about a major blemish in a player's career that brings up doubts if they are truly deserving of the greatest of all time title. That's not to say that a perfect basketball career exists. Everyone has made mistakes. But just like there are different classifications of crimes, there are different levels of basketball crimes. For instance, everyone has missed a free throw or committed a turnover that cost them a playoff series. Everyone has shot poorly from the field in a big playoff game. I consider these performances as basketball misdemeanors. But there are some players that committed Class A felonies. We're going to bring up 4 players who are in the GOAT discussion that are guilty of this. So let's put on our judicial robes and you be the judge if these players should be guilty and sentenced to life without the GOAT title. The crime in question occurred in the 2010 playoffs against the Boston Celtics and the 2011 finals against the Dallas Mavericks. Let's present the evidence to the court. It first started in Game 5 of the 2010 semifinals. I bring this up not because he scored 15 points on 3 of 14 shooting. It's the little effort that he seemed to be playing with. He settled for jump shots. He looked disinterested on defense. In a crucial game of the series, it seemed like he didn't want to be there. He looked so different in the previous 4 games when he was attacking the rim relentlessly and delivering huge performances. That same intensity and energy, for some reason, were non-existent. This would also be the last game that he would play on Cleveland's home floor before leaving for Miami. If this was a one-time offense, then it wouldn't be such a big deal. But then he did it again the following year in the finals of all places. It's not that he averaged 15.8 points per game on 44% shooting for the last 4 games of the series. It's not that he scored 8 points in Game 4. It's that he refused to shoot the ball even when he had wide open looks. It's that he refused to drive to the rim with a 38-year-old Jason Kidd guarding him. It's that he took himself out of the game on the biggest stage of the NBA. Playing as detached and passive as LeBron did with a finals game at stake is very hard to defend. But then he had a 7-year stretch where he pulled out more than enough big-time performances to nearly erase that crime. The moment after the Miami Heat lost the finals in 2011, many people went as far as to say that he would never enter the GOAT conversation. He's not only back in the conversation, but some people believe he deserves that title. And I don't blame anyone for thinking that. But for me, the greatest player of all time for any sport should never be accused of giving up on a playoff game. They should never be the 3rd leading scorer for their own team and let a role player average more points for the series. That's what Jason Terry was able to do. That's why I don't have LeBron James as the GOAT. But that's just me. How can Michael Jordan be the GOAT if he got bounced from the first round in 3 straight years? My GOAT never did that. Well, how the tables have turned. In the last 5 years, LeBron James has been bounced from the first round 3 times, the same amount as Michael Jordan. This terrible argument can no longer be used against Michael without sounding like a complete hypocrite. In my opinion, this was never a sound argument to begin with. Thankfully, we'll never have to hear this ever again for this simple fact. For many basketball analysts, the 3 greatest players are Michael Jordan, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and LeBron James. And guess what? All 3 players have gone 3 postseasons without winning a playoff series. What we want to consider now is how they performed in those series and what kind of help they had. That way, we can destroy this flawed argument forever. Let's take a look at Michael Jordan's 3 first-round exits. This happened in the first 3 years of his career. How many All-Star caliber players did he play with? 0. How many Hall of Famers did he play with? Just one. That was George Gervin in 1986, who was playing the final season of his career. All of those teams were terrible. That is evident in the records that they had in that 3-year span. They had 0 winning seasons. The most they won was 40 games, which came in 1987. That was when Michael Jordan had the greatest scoring season in modern NBA history. He averaged over 37 points per game and still couldn't carry his talentless team to a winning record. It was enough to reach the playoffs, but they were facing the best teams the Eastern Conference had to offer during that time. In his rookie year, he was playing the 59-win Milwaukee Bucks. Expecting a rookie to lead a team to beat such a seasoned and talent-heavy team is ridiculous. To Jordan's credit, he had a respectable playoff debut. He averaged 29.3 points on 44% shooting, 8.5 assists, 5.8 rebounds, and 2.8 steals per game. But that was only enough to win 1 game. In the following year, Michael only played 18 games in the regular season due to suffering a broken foot. The Bulls struggled big time without him, and they barely qualified to reach the playoffs. And their first round opponent was the Boston Celtics, the team that many consider to be the greatest ever. Against them, he averaged 43.7 points per game. That is only the highest mark in NBA history. On top of that, he posted the highest scoring game in playoff history in Game 2 with a 63-point performance. Imagine counting that defeat against him. Even while having the greatest scoring series ever, the Bulls still couldn't win a game. That should tell us everything we need to know about the state of the team at that time. 1987 was a little different, but not in a good way. The 4 best scorers from the 1986 team were all gone. It was extremely impressive to see Michael carry this team to 10 more victories, despite how terrible the supporting cast was. The Bulls ended with the 8th seed, and they lost to the same Boston Celtics team in the first round. A team with 5 Hall of Famers is going to beat a team with 1 every single time. LeBron fans should know this very well. That's all that we heard after he got swept by the Warriors in the 2018 finals. But if the talent discrepancy isn't enough to disregard this argument, if the fact that we're talking about the first 3 seasons of his career, if that isn't enough to come to the logical conclusion that he wasn't at his best yet, then that means that everything else is fair game. That opens the door to critiquing what happened to LeBron, his history of getting bounced from the first round started in 2021. You know, the year after they won the title and LeBron won Finals MVP. The Phoenix Suns defeated the defending champions in 6 games. Yes, it's true that Anthony Davis was hurt and only played 5 games. But it's also true that Chris Paul was hurt. He went to JJ Redick's old podcast and told him that he didn't know why they were guarding him. He couldn't shoot at all. The proof is in the numbers. He averaged 9.2 points on 38% shooting. By no surprise, that is his second least efficient shooting series of his playoff career. That means that the Suns weren't at 100% either. The difference is that Devin Booker outplayed LeBron James. He averaged 29.7 points compared to LeBron's 23.3 points. After losing the series, LeBron thought it was a good time to mention that his ankle sprain never fully recovered after returning 2 games prior to the start of the playoffs. His next first-round exit came against the Denver Nuggets in 2024. I'm old enough to remember what the narrative was after getting swept by this very team in the previous year. They were saying that if Jamal Murray wasn't playing out of his mind, Lakers would have made this series much more competitive. Well, they got their wish this time around. He shot 40% from the field and 29% from the 3. But the results were nearly the same. They suffered a gentleman's sweep. Now, remember that Michael lost to teams that had a multitude of Hall of Fame talent. Can we say the same about this series? We can safely say that this Denver Nuggets team is nowhere near the same as the Celtics teams that MJ had to face. Forget Hall of Fame talent, they only had 1 All-Star on the team. Don't forget that Jamal Murray has been to as many All-Star games as you and me, 0 times. But Nikola Jokic completely outclassed LeBron and the Lakers. And now, We have what just happened recently. The Minnesota Timberwolves have eliminated the Lakers from the first round. Despite having home court advantage, despite having the best player of the series on their side, as well as another All-NBA player, they couldn't get past a team that so many people were saying would be eliminated in 5 games. Let's not act like people were saying that this very team was going to make it to the finals. If that was the expectation, then the word to use to describe what happened is that they choked. They had their opportunities to win these games. They couldn't get it done in big moments. Now let's review what we just discussed. Michael Jordan never got bounced from the first round after winning a championship. He usually responded with another title. But both Kareem and LeBron were guilty of this. Jordan's best teammates from those 3 years were Charles Oakley and Orlando Woolridge. They have a combined 1 All-Star appearance in their careers. LeBron's best teammates are future Hall of Famers Anthony Davis and Luka Doncic. Michael was never favored to win those series. Kareem was favored in 2 of those series, and LeBron was favored in 2025. All 3 have been bounced from the first round the same number of times. If we want to talk about the number of times they missed reaching the playoffs, Jordan and Kareem have both done it twice. LeBron has done it 4 times. And with that, we can now bury this incredibly stupid argument to rest forever. What's the argument that has been made for his GOAT case? That he's bigger, faster, and stronger. He has better rebounding and assist totals. He has recorded high numbers for a longer duration. Nobody has been able to play at this level after turning the age of 40. There's an argument to make that he's had the best career. What's important to do here is establish the criteria, to know what your standard of excellence is and never waver. I give much more importance to how a player performed at their very best. If I take Jordan's best and LeBron's best, who was the better player and who accomplished more? There is no question that the answer is Michael Jordan. If we're talking scoring, LeBron's career high is 31.4. That will be Jordan's 7th best. His career high is better by nearly 6 points per game. People love to talk about LeBron's all-around game, even though Michael plays a different style. But for one season, he proved to the world that he could be the best at that aspect if he wanted to. In 1989, he averaged 32.5 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, and 2.9 steals per game. Has LeBron ever done that? He hasn't. His 2008 season was the closest, but it still isn't up to par. As far as defense, Michael was considered the best defender in the league at his best. LeBron has 0 Defensive Player of the Year awards. But that's not all. Did you know that LeBron's going to finish his career without surpassing Jordan in total steals? He is behind by nearly 200 despite playing 7 more seasons. But let's shift our attention to the playoffs. Michael has 10 games where he scored over 50 points. That includes a 63-point game. LeBron has only scored over 50 once. As far as playoff series, LeBron's best is 30.5 points per game. That would also be Jordan's 7th best. His career high is better by nearly 7 points per game. As far as assists, Michael's best was an average of 11.4, which came in the finals. LeBron's best is 11.3, which came in the semifinals. As far as who was the better winner, it's not just that Michael went 6-0 in the finals and LeBron went 4-6. Jordan has a playoff series win percentage of 81. LeBron's is 80%. For the regular season, Jordan's teams have a win percentage of 66.9. LeBron's is 61.6%. That's considering the fact that Michael has played with 1 All-Star teammate for his entire career. LeBron has played with 8. Seriously, what's the excuse for him not winning more? Michael's highs are clearly better. As far as the lows, we can point to LeBron's 2011 final series when the Heat were the favorites to win. But LeBron recorded the 5th lowest scoring average of the series. Even 0-time All-Star Jason Terry performed better. There were also 2 games in which he had 0 field goals in the 4th quarter. Has Michael Jordan ever done anything remotely as bad as that? Should the greatest player of all time have that in their resume? My answer is no. Other players might have strong arguments, but my GOAT remains Michael Jordan. Now, where do you stand on this debate? Let me know why you believe Michael Jordan is the GOAT in the comments. Thanks for watching.